Hello everyone. So, I made this video because there is something that I would like to get out of the way. I do know that Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach is not exactly a perfect game. In fact, it's far from it. But I never expected it to be. And for the most part, there are 2 points that I would like to expand on. The first point is that I have played this game on my channel maybe almost enough times to count on one hand, completely. I played this game maybe 2 or 3 times in the past ever since it came out in December of 2021. And I can understand if some were thinking, well, he's coming back to this, even though we all know what happens. Granted, I did cover the game when updates came out. Now, the reason I wanted to cover this game like I did with I covered the game with a hilarious and wacky and fun and intense modded version. Some things were not followed up on because I haven't uploaded all the episodes yet, but you might see what I mean. Some things were and were not followed up on because I was starting to think the DLC is going to be coming out this month in July of 2023, provided there are no further delays. So, I wanted to... How do I put this? I'm not gonna record an entire PS5 playthrough in case you're wondering if that's what's gonna happen. Because I thought I already did that. Wait, no. I played the game, I think on PS4 in June of 2022, and I got a PS5, I believe, in November of 2022. So, I might as well get a few points out of the way. So I guess I can show a bit of this. So some points I want to make is that I can completely understand that the game has not exactly had the best reputation or legacy or really anything of that sort. In fact, I even saw a review just this morning that basically talked about all the ways and all the reasons that the game is essentially broken, bugged, and possibly beyond fixing. And I'm still holding on to the hope that the DLC will hold promise to being more solid than the base game actually was. So I'd like to talk a bit about...
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls,
you all have...
Fazbear Entertainment would
Do I
like
want
you
to skip?
Put your hands together for the one,
you know
the
what?
only Freddy Fazbear.
I'm gonna turn the volume down. So, basically, the game was fundamentally... I don't know if I want to say it was a huge flop, because it did have, if not very few, actual solid moments. Like, I do love the game. I do. It's not everything I hoped it would be. I am disappointed with it in some cases. But that doesn't mean I would ever stop loving it. But there are some problems that have been made very clear. And one of those things being there's a lot left to be desired about the game that the company never really sought to fix. One of those things being, you all remember the update in June of 2022. And unfortunately, there were never any updates following that. There never really were. A lot of things left to be desired, and it was never really fixed. The amount of times I played the game, whether people grew tired of it or not, I still enjoyed it. I did. Let me do something real quick. Honestly, I would probably dare say the console version works better than the PC version. So,
I am experiencing malfunction. The recharge cycle is not complete.
So, another thing is,
Down here.
Steel Wool was basically, they were very good at creating a VR experience because they created Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted. But they just really didn't have what it takes to create an actual console game.
There you are.
And the thing about that is, it did deliver in some places, but not in all the places that one could imagine.
Who are you?
And I know I'm probably just going on and on, probably without making any solid points, so I'll start trying to lay some foundation for what I'm trying to say.
Notify the main office.
I've got a love-hate relationship with the game. Well, not really love-hate. I do really like the game, but I know that it's far from perfect, and I don't expect it to be. There are things the game has done that I've loved, and things the game has done that I've not loved.
Your mother?
I mean, hell, I know that the game is... the base game is a lost cause. And for people who can't see that, let me paint this picture for you. If you've played the latest version of the game, and you've seen all these wonderful additions, and you're like, wow, the game isn't really as bad as people make it out to be. Well, that's the latest version of the game you played. If you had played the game as it started out, you would definitely see the difference between night and day. There were so many things wrong. So many things wrong. Also, look, ray tracing. Love it. There were so many things wrong with the game that it would make the Sims 3 patch notes weep, wishing that these patch notes for Security Breach could have been nearly as hilarious to read. But unfortunately, that was not the case. You could probably look up on the Google right now a list of things that were patched in the Security Breach. In fact, I recommend you do so right now, because you are going to find a lot of things that you wonder, how did this get into the game? Why did this have to be patched in the first place? Shouldn't it have been looked into? Because one common thing that the people playing the game usually tend to come to an agreement on is that it was very clear about two things about the game. The one thing is that the game was supposedly, probably, most likely, not play-tested. And play-tested means, basically testing the game, testing the waters, searching for anything wrong with it, to iron out and make it a solid and polished game. The second thing is... sorry, I'm not really good at doing these speeches right off the top of my head. I usually do better with a script, but... at the same time, just not having to write everything for myself, it would allow me to have a bit more freedom with speech. Although it would have a very more concise and understandable point of what I'm trying to make. So the first point is people think that the game was not play tested, that it was not, tested out, made sure that certain bugs wouldn't get in the way. And I honestly think if it wasn't play tested, it very well should have been, because Steel Wool would have been able to see all these issues. I mean, hell, the game was literally like 80 gigabytes before they removed a lot of files from the game. And all those files was concepts that never made it into the actual game itself. They probably were at some point, but because Sony decided, hey, we don't want you to release the game at a later time, we want you to release it right now. Because I can't recall if it was because of holiday sales or something else, but Sony basically kind of pressured Steel Wool into releasing early. And granted, you might say, well, why would Steel Wool choose to listen to them instead of trying to be like, hey, we're doing our own thing. We're going to do it when we want to. It was also because the game was very hyped up, and that kind of pressure can definitely add on to the pressure that Sony was already putting on Steel Wool. Like, I'm not saying Steel Wool didn't have some fault here, and I'm not saying they're a horrible company. I am saying though that Sony did not control their release date. Steel Wool did. And although I can understand that it was a very tense situation, I feel like there probably could have been some power that Steel Wool could have had to choose to maybe drop Sony as a contractor, or just fight against it and say, hey, we want to make sure this game is what we promised. And I'm not disappointed with the company. I don't condone what they did. I don't encourage it. I don't approve of it. But I'm not entirely disappointed in them. They're not Glowstick Entertainment where they release a game and just completely ignore it. And believe you me, I don't think I'm ever going back to Dark Deception. Because Glowstick Entertainment still has not fucking fixed their game. There are so many things wrong with it ever since they released the chapter overhauls, but I'm getting off topic here. This game, it has its own charm. People describe it as basically a running simulator because of how haphazardly it's put together. You have all these tasks, you run around the pizzerias and the Pizzaplex, and you basically realize the game was aesthetically pleasing. Like, it was very 80s, very vaporwave, very retro, but it seems like Steel Wool, it seems like they built the Pizzaplex first and then built the game around it. Now, that might not sound so bad on the surface, but let me explain why that's a problem. When you design a game, and you design the location in which the game takes place, you are more often than not bound to create things that basically serve no purpose other than to be aesthetically pleasing. That's essentially it. Because if you've seen a playthrough, even my playthrough, or playthroughs of Security Breach, you would know that there are a lot of rooms in this place that basically serve no function other than to be aesthetically pleasing. And let's not forget, there's the doors which require level 10 security that basically have nothing behind them. Even if you were to bring Freddy over and have him open the door for you, it just opens into a black void, because because those voids represent content that were meant to be in the game but never got a chance to be implemented. And the highest amount of level security you can even get in the game is level 8. So it was implied that there was going to be 10 levels of security, maybe more, but we never got to that point. And I'll admit, I have been with this game since day one. I have on my channel, you can find playthroughs of the game launch day. You can find playthroughs of the game on launch day and post June of 2022. You can find all the different things that have been changed, modified, fixed, patched, all that stuff. I mean, they even, like I said, they even removed a lot of the files that were in the game that you could find that reduced the file size. And the thing that really, I don't want to say it upsets me, but it certainly is very disappointing, is those files removed. I'm pretty sure all of that was stuff that would have made it into the game, but Steel Wool just didn't have time to add it all in. It was going to be added in as the game was naturally developed, but Sony just pressured them to release early. I think it was because of a holiday sale, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that, because a holiday sale would mean, well, a lot of people could get their hands on the game. And I don't know if Sony was really thinking that one through. Like, no matter how you spin it, they still wanted Steel Wool to release the game early, before it was even finished, and I don't know how they didn't realize that people were going to be upset with it. I'm really hoping this wasn't like a greed thing where they could have wanted to squeeze as much money out of multiple different people at once, because I mean, even if that were the case, they still developed an amazing PlayStation 5 console, and I think there's maybe sometime in the next several years they might come up with plans for a PlayStation 6, but that's not to be, I don't know if that's confirmed yet. But for games like this, Steel Wool at least very much cared about Security Breach. I mean, hell, they started working on the Ruin DLC not too long after the game was released, and I like to believe it was because they knew they had to make something good out of what was essentially a mishmash of, well, haphazardly placed pieces of a mostly incomplete puzzle. And the DLC, you might think, oh, well, they're still working on something, how are they going to botch this one up? Or you might think, well, hopefully the DLC is going to be good. And you know what? I'm leaning towards the latter. Because the thing about a DLC is, it could be big, it could be medium, it could be small, but the thing is, this DLC is more of a narrow line for Steel Wool to follow. It's not complicated and all scrambled around like the main game was. This DLC is like something linear based on a particular storyline, a story beat for them to follow. And to me, that tells me they've got how many people working on this DLC line, this storyline. So this is going to be a lot of people adding something into something very tight-knit and focused, because they've already gone through the whole story of the main game, going from here to there, from place A to place B. But for the DLC, well, it's a lot more to polish and focus on without being all over the place. And to me, I think that would lead to a very, very good DLC. And, if I didn't already add, they are releasing this DLC for free. I think that's a very nice gift to give to people who were overall really disappointed with the game. I mean, if you haven't seen Markiplier's playthrough of Security Breach, there is a video out there titled Markiplier gradually loses his patience with Security Breach that basically tells him about the amount of suffering that the game went through. And everybody knows, or if you don't know, one of the features in this game was, it was essentially that if you were spotted by a staff bot, they would sound an alarm, and an animatronic would teleport straight near you to chase you down. Now, some people mistakenly thought this was a bug. It wasn't. It was a feature implemented into the game to make up for how easy it was to lose the animatronics in the immensely expansive and large as hell Pizzaplex. Which, on paper, it does make sense, but the execution was mostly miss when it comes to hit or miss. Because sometimes it generally creates incredibly unfair experiences. Now, for those of you who did not know, back when the game first came out, there was a design when it came to making it to surviving until 6 a.m., which would be that you could continue to explore the Pizzaplex, but all of the save stations in the game would be disabled. So, if you died even once, no matter how much time you spent trying to make progress, just like that, all gone. And people were pretty upset about this. Now, there were two solutions to this problem, both of which, well, felt, how do I put this? Both solutions to this problem were, do I want to say unorthodox? Out of place? Basically, it wasn't something that the game intended for you to do. Well, one of them wasn't. The other one was just kind of acknowledging the problem, but not really taking the proper steps to fix it. The first solution to being able to save after 6 a.m. was there was a point where you could go back into Roxy Raceway and grab the head of this driver assistant robot for a go-kart game that was cut out of the main game. And as soon as you grabbed this, it actually would make it so the clock would rewind to sometime past 5 a.m. And at this point, the game thinks that you haven't gotten to the point where all the save stations would be disabled, so you could save anywhere you wanted. Eventually, Steel will unfortunately patch to this because, it wasn't something that was meant to be in the game. In its place, they placed down a singular save station in the atrium. Now, it does sort of fix the problem, but that didn't exactly nullify 2 points that could very easily be made. If you were to spend a lot of time away from the atrium doing something and then just coming back to save, one of two things could happen. The first is that there could be a glitch where you get stuck and you end up somewhere even worse, or you can't move, or you could be killed by an animatronic in an incredibly unfair situation. That exact second thing happened to Markiplier in his playthrough in the West Arcade, because he was looking around for Glamrock Chica, and she essentially spawned right on top of him. Do you want to know how much progress that undid? That situation alone? 1 hour and 20 minutes. All of that undone by one animatronic unfairly spawning on top of him. Needless to say, Mark, well, he was incredibly unhappy, and he basically explained that he can understand if he made a mistake and it was on him for him dying. But he was careful. He looked around for where Chica was, but she still spawned on top of him and unfairly killed him. And honestly, fun fact, the same thing actually happened to me once. Way back when I played Case Animatronics. there was an instance where the owl animatronic was kind of moving around, trying to, you know, it was mostly stationary in certain rooms. And I was in that phase where I wanted to get all of the documents. I made a map and everything, just to understand the full story. And there was an instance where the owl animatronic spawned on top of me and killed me. And that pretty much undid whatever progress I got trying to stay alive and collect the documents. And honestly, I was pissed. Because I can understand how, I mean, the game is very solid and hardly buggy. Like, that was just like a very rare instance of being unlucky. But for a game like this, to try and compensate for the lack of actual animatronic AI by having them teleported to you just because you're noticed by the plethora of staff bots patrolling the entire place. It's basically a death sentence, given that not only post-game or late-game are two of them, well, one of them essentially immune to whatever Phaser Blaster or Phascam can stun them, but it just feels unfair that for all that effort you do, it could very easily all be taken away from you just because the game decided, yeah, no, I'm sorry, this animatronic appeared right here near you, and now you're gonna die. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't hate the game. I've said this before, but I want to reiterate, I do not hate the game. I don't. I'm disappointed with it in many aspects, but I don't hate it, which is why I find myself coming back to it here and there. And I believe this might actually be the first or second time I've actually touched it on PS5, because I took a look and a lot of the trophies on the PS5 version are not unlocked, so I think the last time I even touched this was on PC or PS4 even. And something I wanted to do was, having gone through it in a modded mode on the PC, I'm going to, off-screen, go through the game again, vanilla. And the reason I didn't want to upload another playthrough of it is because it would seem very repetitive and very stale. I am going to record the DLC and upload it to my channel. That's obviously my intent. But trying to do like a side-by-side on PC and PS5 felt very, I don't know, pushy. It felt very unnecessary. And besides, the modded version of the game added a lot of, surprises and twists. You've already seen how the console version plays out, but I kind of wanted to experience this one outside of recording to, not really have to worry about any restraints. But I wanted to record this because I really wanted to voice my opinions and thoughts on the game before because as I was uploading these videos of a modded version, I wanted to point out that I was not trying to subvert for any lack of entertainment that the base game would have or would not have given. Because, admittedly, no matter how I spin it, I still think it's a fun game. But there are problems with it. And I know I'm kind of being a broken record here and kind of repeating myself on that point, but for people who don't really get it, I just want to paint this picture as clear as possible. So for instance, think back to when I mentioned about the 6 a.m. thing and how you cannot save after 6 a.m. there is a point in the game where you find a party pass, and you can choose one of 2 attractions to deal with one of 2 animatronics, Glamrock Chica and Montgomery Gator. And depending on what attraction you choose, some see it as a way of selecting a proper way of defending yourself from the animatronics, which the review video I watched, it was basically, I think it was called security, something about FNAF security breach is broken and not because of the bugs. I may actually include a link to that video in the description. It's like an hour and 41 minutes, so if you've got enough time to dedicate yourself to really understanding where this game went wrong, I definitely recommend giving it a watch. Now, the point I want to make is, you can choose between dealing with Montgomery Gator or Glamrock Chica. Now, for new players not aware that you cannot save after 6 a.m. unless you go back to the atrium, this still presents a problem if you decide to go into Fazer Blast instead of Montgomery's Gator Golf. Because the thing about Montgomery is, before you shatter him, as they are referred to when you destroy them, before you shatter him, he is essentially immune to the Fazer Blaster or the Fazcam. The Fazer Blaster being like a laser tag gun that stuns animatronics when you shoot them in the eyes, and the Fazcam, basically a flash camera that sacrifices ammunition for AoE, area of effect. And it basically stuns animatronics in like a wider parameter. But it takes a while, the Fazcam does that, but it takes a while to recharge. Now, there was initially going to be a feature where you could use the recharge stations that recharge your flashlight to do the same, I believe, for your Fazer Blaster and your Fazcam. They don't. That's one of the features that I believe did not make it into the final game. And admittedly, it's honestly a little frustrating because it felt like it would have been such a lifesaver. Now, the Fazer Blaster and English. I cannot do words. The Fazer Blaster and the Fazcam, they do act as detriments to the fear and tension of the game, yet at the same time, they don't. Because you might feel powerful and safe and everything as you carry these weapons with you. I mean, you can even have both at the same time if you go far enough in the game. However, if you run out of ammo for either of them, you do feel that sense of dread and vulnerability and defenselessness. And I took a look at the debug menu for the PC version. I believe it takes, 30 seconds for it to reload. 30 seconds. I don't know if that applies to the Fazer Blaster or the Fazcam, but if it applies to both, 30 seconds without ammunition, and more often than not, hiding places don't really work. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Most of the time, you'll find yourself in a hiding place where you cannot see anything outside of the hiding place unless you use the cameras. I mean, again, the video I will link in the description covers in a more detailed version of these problems. But the point I want to make is, no matter how buggy it may be now, I decided I want to give myself a more vanilla experience of the game, going through everything and doing what I could to prepare for the DLC that's coming up. Because It's not determined whether the DLC takes place before or after the events of the Pizzaplex. I think it actually happens after, because the canon ending of the Pizzaplex, or the game, sorry, it shows Gregory and Freddy escaping from the crumbling Five Nights at Freddy's 6 location that the Pizzaplex is built on top of. But we don't see what happens to Afton entirely. We just know he's captured by the huge amalgamation of animatronic parts and wires known as the Blob, which is basically a melted together version of the animatronics from Five Nights at Freddy's Pizzeria Simulator. And also, we don't necessarily know what happens to Freddy and Gregory for them to escape from the building in the first place, because one of the biggest points was that it was mentioned the elevator to go down there that was located in Roxy Raceway was a one-way trip. And bless the game's heart, it does kind of give you a miraculous autosave if you go down there, because the game knows that otherwise you'd have to do everything again just to get to that point. But it basically acts as a one-way trip, and it's not really explained how they get out of there. My thought was going to be that maybe they don't. Maybe the DLC is basically Gregory being trapped in there. But there is a post-credits cutscene, not really cutscene, mostly a post-credits frame that shows a 3D render of Gregory and Freddy sitting on top of a grassy hill outside, showing that they escaped the Pizzaplex. So, I should also mention that, again, that is the canon ending to Security Breach. As disappointing as the Burn Trap boss fight was, that you can still die during, I think, unless they patched that. Actually, no, I think they fixed that. I think. So, the trailer for Ruin, which I will also link the latest one in the description, it basically implies that Gregory is trapped within the Ruin DLC. Trapped within the ruins of the Pizzaplex. So, I want to say maybe it takes place after the main game, but something that also tugs on me is I don't know if it's actually Gregory, because it almost sounds artificial. I'm not going to say why exactly. You'll have to see the trailer for yourself. But if you pay attention, and if you're really observant enough, one might think that it's not actually Gregory. But that's just my theory. Now, again, I want to say all this because there are a lot of issues that are existent within the game. You know, cut concepts, a plethora of bugs and glitches. One of the most notable things being that the game is notorious for abusing the tutorial system. And it's basically very hand-holdy, and just one of the most prominent examples of this is during the sections where you're upgrading the parts on Freddy. It basically tells you, through the narrator, or the hand unit tutorial, whatever you want to call it, you basically hear the guy like, press the large black button in the center of Freddy's face to open his face. And then you proceed to get a instruction card that tells you to do that exact thing that you just heard, pausing the game, requiring you to hold the button down for like 3 seconds, or 5 seconds, or whatever, just to get it out of the way. And it does this for every single procedural step to upgrading him. To upgrading Freddy. Now you might think, well, that's not such a big deal. You have to think, and you have to realize, people want to immerse themselves and really soak in the atmosphere that the game is trying to provide. So when you have someone basically holding your hand for the entire game, it starts to become annoying. You may noticed earlier, I turned off instruction cards. What I just described to you is one of the exact reasons why. Because the game over-explains what you already know, and it does not explain what you do need to know. For instance, there are little soda cans, 4 of them, that you can find throughout the game. They are called Fizzy Faz. This is one of the sins that the game commits. It doesn't tell you that the Fizzy Faz actually increases your stamina for sprinting. It does not tell you this. And most of the collectibles in the game basically don't really amount to any sort of use. The most you can get out of it is the golden presents that you can find for golden plushies amount to one of the endings in the game. It also doesn't tell you that you essentially have to collect at least 70 different prizes. There's a lot of prizes in the game to collect, so you're bound to probably get that much. But if you just ignore all the presents, it doesn't tell you that you have to collect over 70 different collectibles. There are things like there's things like keychains, food, shirts, piñatas, masks, stuff like that. Honestly, I think a really nice feature that they probably would have included if the game had been completely finished was that you could wear these different items, or you would have been given a witty, funny description of these items, or something like that. You could wear a Monty mask. You could wear a shirt with Chica's name on it, with a very fancy font. The thing like the piñata, it basically would have maybe had a funny joke about it. That's something I feel like they would have had in the finished game had it been finished. But just it just feels disappointing to me that there was a lot of potential for this game that unfortunately was not able to come to fruition. Because let me tell you something. I do enjoy this game no matter how many times I play it.
That is the security guard.
But
she can help.
No, I don't trust her.
Why not?
ultimately,
She is, but she's trying to get me. Isn't there some other way for you to communicate with me besides talking so
sorry, I was trying to
Take this.
collect my thoughts.
It is a novelty Freddy Fazwatch.
The amount of collectibles in the game. Ooh, rumbly.
What was that?
I am sending you an encoded message. Hello, Gregory.
This right here.
Freddy, I will escort you to the main entrance. However, I am unable to leave this room. You should have no problem. There is a button on the wall that will open the door to the back room. I will make it accessible to you now.
Okay, I'm gonna adjust the brightness real quick. Oh. Performance or visual? I'm gonna go visual. I'm also gonna leave the camera to default. Ah, see, that's better. Look at that. Look at that shiny detail. So what was I saying? It was something about... Oh yeah, the collectibles. The collectibles in this game like I said, they don't really amount to much of anything. They basically are like, hey, these are glorified, cutesy little things you can pick up and then just stuff in your pocket. Hilariously enough, I feel like this was, or should, if not, it should have been lampshaded in the funny TV tropes page of Security Breach, that you can pick up little popsicles that are in the shape of Roxy, Monty, Freddy, and Chica. Does nobody consider that maybe, just maybe, those little popsicles will melt in my pocket and become a very squishy, gooey mess? I can't recall if that's covered on the funny page of TV tropes about the game, but I will be so happy if it is. Oh, ooh, that's cool. That's very pretty. It also covers the fact that when you zap Chica with the Phaser Blaster, her line is "bonk bonk bonk," but the way and tone that it's delivered makes it sound like she's saying "what the fuck?" And it's hilarious to think about. It really is. Because little things like that, I can definitely get very much enjoyment out of. But there's like other things about the game that, and I know this video will probably be very long as I'm describing how I feel about this, so I'm probably going to simply title this My Thoughts, Opinions, and Feelings About Security Breach. And if you saw the video timestamp, well, you know what you're in for. Admittedly, what do I even... I find it funny how earlier I said I'm probably not gonna upload a video that's Security Breach on PS5, and here I am doing, well, not really for the sole purpose of gameplay, but more so for the purpose of wanting to really not let there be a still image while I explain things. So try not to get too distracted. I tried to do something to make it more entertaining, as best as I could. Oh hey, oh hello. Look at you. That's like a little toy Freddy plush, I think. It's not my fault. It's these fat plastic fingers that can't press the buttons. That's a line from Ultimate Custom Night. Now, what was I saying?
Done, Gregory. There is an open air vent inside.
Okay, let me gather my thoughts. Oh, there's an alarm. Let me gather my thoughts real quick. Okay, so I talked about the collectibles. I talked about the length of the length of this video. I also woke up not too long ago, so I may not have my brain fully awake yet. I also said this was one such example when I pulled up the Fazwatch. Now, the game trailer for Security Breach before the game came out showed a very different image of the Fazwatch. It basically had an interface on the watch itself that basically showed, I think, how many party passes you had, how much power your flashlight had, how much power Freddy had. It was very different and like very unique. And I feel like this was the base concept before it actually would have been retrofitted to be more proper. Or something like that, because if Steel Wool already had something planned for this, there's two outcomes. They either changed it to be maybe more convenient or something, or they released the trailer of a concept they had before they could fully flesh out that very concept. And admittedly, I can't say I mean, companies are bound to make certain mistakes. That's just how it is. And things like that, how there was like a drastic change, I don't want to say it was a lie about what would have been included. If the intended result was changed because of some unforeseen circumstance, like, I don't think they were wanting to do that just to lie to people. At least that's what I think, because I feel like they were initially going to make changes that they probably should have mentioned. And this is kind of just like a little bit, maybe even not really a nitpick, but more so a kind of thing of, hey, the thing we showed off in the trailer, I don't know if it really will suit audiences. I don't know if it'll really work for everyone, so we got to change it into something more proper. And for the most part, in a way, they did. But it's just kind of a shame, because in the original release, when the game first came out, we never got that fancy view of the Fazwatch. If you look at the trailer for the base game of Security Breach, I think it shows Gregory like pulling up the Fazwatch on his wrist, actually showing proper use of it. I mean, we still have the animation here, but it's mostly just a little static screen, and then it just kind of changes. And it's just, it feels incomplete. It's not really that, it doesn't really take away from the game or anything, but for me personally, I am the kind of person who really takes notice of everything around me. And I essentially am like, hey, this thing that I remember was announced differently, I can understand the replacement, but you might want to consider at least having maybe something more polished to replace it with. I mean, this is fine, but the way it's presented feels like it's incomplete. Like it was like maybe you guys jumped around trying to complete different things, which is why I'm very grateful that for the DLC, they are probably going to have a more linear, even if it is linear, they'll have a more polished and focused DLC. And the animatronics themselves. The video in the description basically points out that they are never really a threat. And the reason for this is because of the insufferable amount of times they repeat very linear amount of voice lines, basically letting you know, hey, I'm here and I'm looking for you. After a while, this starts to take away from the game and the immersion and the tension and the horror and whatnot, mostly the tension, because how can you feel you're in danger if you know that there is danger? I mean, that is very much possible. You could know that there's a threat, and you could be like, hey, this thing is after me, and I need to not run into it. But the game starts to become very predictable. Oh, yes, here we have Roxy. The game starts to become very predictable when the danger constantly announces itself. And not only that, even if you're seen by one of the animatronics, it is stupidly easy to lose them. Especially when you have the Phaser Blaster or the Phascam or both. Because, there's also hiding inside of Freddy, which basically makes the other bots ignore you. And the stupidest thing about this...
Your fans are watching you right now. I know.
Okay, well that's totally not creepy at all. The thing about this is... the animatronics, you can call over Freddy, climb inside of his chest cavity, and hide for safety. The thing that I, honest to God, find the most ridiculous about this is that the animatronics just don't even, they don't attack Freddy or anything, they don't, get into a struggle, they don't do much of anything. They just completely forget the fact that they just watched you probably climb inside of Freddy's chest and hide. The game just treats it like they just didn't see you do it, even if you climb in right in front of them. And this especially happens after you leave the daycare area, where after you escape Moondrop, you basically go to press a button to open the door, You're grabbed by Sundrop, or Sunrise, whatever you want to call him. He kicks you out. He calls security on you. And the animatronics, they appear to come get you. Yes, Montgomery going apeshit. You can't see him, but he's in there. He calls security on you, they appear. You hide inside of Freddy. And I don't think the video covered this, but it's really, really ridiculous how you can literally hide inside of Freddy in front of an animatronic and they don't do jack shit. But when you go to hide in a hiding place around the corner where they don't know which one you hide in, they are at least smart enough to check those hiding places. But in a way it still feels kind of unfair because, I mean, I guess they are smart enough to start checking any hiding place thinking you might be in one of them, but I don't know, something about that still feels a little bit unfair if they like almost instantly know where you are. And the thing about it is, they can see you from a good distance away, even if a staff bot hasn't detected you. It's kind of stupid. And I believe that they, I can't recall if they can actually see in the dark. I think they might be able to. Oh, it's already been 56 minutes. I believe they might be able to. And I don't know. I don't think they can. I could be wrong. But even then it feels a little unfair if they can, because there is actually something that the game kind of misleads you about. The game tells you that when you have to sneak around and use stealth, which sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, depending on if the game will be made easier or harder, depending on your choices, you are essentially told when the little icon in the lower right of the screen there is blue, it means, what exactly was the wording? It said that, oh, fuck, what did it say? It said that when your outline was blue, it means something about how you are hidden and bots cannot see you. Now, that alone can be very misleading because, fuck, I gotta get to that point and see what exactly it is that it tells me. I mean, I do have informational cards disabled, so whatever. It basically means that bots cannot see you, or that you are hidden. And this can feel very misleading because it just does not work that way. It just doesn't. Blue basically means they have not noticed you. Yellow means a bot is actively searching for you, but the game does not allow you to get to extract information as to whether or not the spot you're in is actually a good hiding spot. And of course, red means you've been discovered. So it's, I don't want to say it's lying, but it feels misleading. Also, I'm going to let you have a moment to take a look at this, because this is, admittedly, the ray tracing on PS5 makes this absolutely gorgeous. And it's not hard to lose an animatronic. Well, all except one, Montgomery. When Montgomery notices you, you are pretty much as good as dead. There's just no doubt about it. You're as good as dead. Because there was an instance where I had a lot of stamina. I kept running around trying to avoid Montgomery. I could not shake him off my tail. I didn't have Freddy nearby. And oh wait, there was a point I was going to mention earlier that I didn't even get to yet. So first off, I'm going to say real quick that if Montgomery's chasing you, the Fazcam and Phaser Blaster do not work on him because of his sunglasses. And on top of that, he is incredibly fast. He is persistent, and may God have mercy on your soul if you chose to deal with Chica before 6 a.m. in the main game, which leads to the point I want to make. The way to deal with Monty is you find a maze control key in the basement of the Superstar Daycare's theater. You go through a harrowing and absolutely frustrating 20 to 40 minutes plus of trying to figure out how the mazer-size maze leading to the catwalks above Montgomery's Gator Golf are supposed to be lined up. And I'm not kidding when I say that, because if you take one look at the maze control room, you can instantly see how uncomfortable it's going to be, because the buttons do not correspond with where you're looking, and the hint that you're given in the absolutely optional, completely ignorable duffel bags that do not really add much to the story, and you lose nothing by ignoring them, it basically tells you, move blue to the corner, you should be able to figure it out from there. It doesn't tell you what specific pattern in the maze to make. It doesn't tell you what general direction to move the stuff in. I mean, that would be giving away the answer, but you could argue that. But I would argue with why does the maze expect you to work with 20 to 40 minutes of time you could have spent doing literally anything else that was more productive, and just end up being frustrated, but you feel like you've won when you finally make it out of the maze. But then that's where I stop you and I say, what if I were to tell you, you would have to do this after 6 a.m. if you chose to deal with Chica first, and if you had to do this to get to Monty, it would be smart to go back to the atrium to save, because it's not that far away. That's granted if Montgomery doesn't get, or anyone doesn't get you first. Now, the thing about this, and you can probably see where I'm going with this, is merely the fact that if you manage to figure out the secret or the fucking combination to the maze, then good on you. If you save, also good on you. A very smart move. However, remember when I said that when 6 a.m. strikes, pretty much all the other save stations outside the atrium, actually there is one other one in the atrium, but all the other save stations become inaccessible except for one in the main lobby area of the atrium? Now, this doesn't generally sound so bad, considering that you can just go right up the stairs up to the right into Mazer-size to get to Gator Golf. My phone's going off again. That's the alarm. Now, the point I'm leading up to is Montgomery's boss fight is, in a word, broken. He's constantly noticing you. The alarm bell sound is constantly going off. And there is actually a glitch where you can hide behind the turret in one of the elevated platforms. If you hug the turret right up against it, Montgomery just completely cannot get you if you do it right. Now, the way you're supposed to win is you have to shoot a bunch of plastic balls into this large bucket to power up something called the Hurricane Hole-in-One, which is basically a large bucket that dumps a bunch of colorful balls onto someone who, I don't know, manages to get a good score in golf or something. I don't know its exact purpose. The problem with this is it's hard to see where Monty is unless you turn up the gamma, which easily solved, but how do I put this? He can also super jump. So he could basically jump up from one part of the catwalks, land right near you, and I mean, generally he's not that much of a threat in terms of chasing you around, because if you're able to get away from him, for some reason, it really is surprising how much he leaves you alone when you're trying to shoot balls. If you're lucky, I guess, unless it was always like that and I was just unlucky. But if you shoot enough balls, you can power up the Hurricane Hole-in-One. You just have to run up near it for a cutscene to play where you can send Monty tumbling downwards. The biggest problem I have with this was before they introduced the save station in the atrium, if you died to Monty, all of that progress that you had done, gone. Just gone. And that's usually why I prefer to deal with Monty first. Because dealing with Chica, she gets crushed in a trash compactor. You're dragged down into the sewers. It's not that hard to deal with her. I mean, you can stun her, for God's sake. And you basically just turn on generators, run through the sewers, go into the Staffbot silo, go back up into where the laundry room was of the Pizzaplex, and then that's it. You can just keep going. Infinitely easier than dealing with Monty, but that also leaves Monty being someone to deal with after 6 a.m. Generally, I have a very particular way of doing things.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for visiting.
Oh yeah, that's another problem I have right here.
Freddy and the gang are pretty tired, but they'll be back again next week after a few days of scheduled maintenance. Please make your way to the front of the building, where you will be given novelty glasses, a voucher for 1 free soda refill, and where you will sign a legal disclaimer releasing us of all liability for anything that might have happened during your visit. Have an awesome night, and we'll see you again soon.
So one thing I wanted to bring up, also this is fucking gorgeous, is the subtitles tend to change faster than the characters speaking the lines. And it's like a personal bother to me, because it should feel like the characters' voices are lined up with, like, the character voices themselves are amazing. Like, they're really, really good. But for the voice lines, subtitles to just be misaligned, it makes me miss what they did before, where if they had an entire line of speech, they wouldn't break it up into multiple parts. They would just have the entire thing take up 1/4 of the screen. I prefer that, because at least then the lines weren't changing faster than the lines being spoken. Also, these things are adorable as all hell. But that's just like kind of a minor nitpick. Look at her go. Yeah, the duffel bags. That's another thing. That's Monty going apeshit in there. The duffel bags are very easily ignorable, and they do provide a lot of lore and explanation for things going on around the Pizzaplex. The thing is, you would not know that if you just completely ignored the duffel bag. You would not really understand much of anything that's going on. And I don't think that's okay. The game doesn't explain vital things to you, like what certain upgrades do and everything. It just says, oh, you got a flashlight upgrade. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, what does that mean? And then it just, you have to figure out that it means you got more battery. Or that you... What the hell is going on with this? Oh, it's shiny, okay. Like, if you got a Freddy upgrade, you're like... And I don't mean, like, animatronic parts, I mean a gift that has a Freddy upgrade. You're like, okay, what does that do? You go over to Freddy, and you realize, oh, okay, I have more battery now. Why couldn't it just have told me that? It's like some of the things I've said I had a problem with, they feel like a nitpick. And honestly, if I did do a video of the PS5 version of Security Breach, probably would be 2 or 3 multi-hour parts to avoid flooding subscription feeds with multiple parts of a game I've beaten like 3 or 4 times. So, yeah. Yeah. Like I was saying, the duffel bags include a lot of explanation and lore. The only problem I even remotely have with this is merely the fact that out of any possible way for you to learn about anything about the Pizzaplex's happenings, why would you include it in duffel bags that seem about as the same level of importance as practically every other collectible in the game? Because most of these, you read them, you basically read that they're experiences people have had with the Pizzaplex that basically seem like what we already know about Fazbear Entertainment, which is that they're a shitty company that, you know, that's cheap, shitty, whatever. And you start to feel like, okay, do I really need to collect these if it's just going to be like this? Some duffel bags, they do have lore, but by that point, you're already thinking, these things aren't important, I'm just going to start ignoring them. And then you're basically lost about what's going on, about some cases. It's just, I feel like if you want to tell a story, make it feel like they're actually in noticeable proper form. Because it doesn't even, I mean, I guess now it tells you what the message is, but it didn't before, I don't think. It, like, before a certain update, it didn't really give an icon as to what it was. Wow, an hour and 12 minutes already. Like, it really didn't give an icon as to what it was. And that's what bothers me. If you're gonna give lore, at least make it, like, off the top of my head, I admittedly can't really think of any other way to make it more noticeable. Like, trying to think of a appropriate, proper way to do so, it can be hard if you have to really think of something special. But here's the thing. I know that they wanted to do something that discerns or differentiates from the presents, because, you know, the presents are their own collectible. But if you wanted to do anything, make it as simple as maybe like a note, like an actual physical piece of paper lying around for you to collect, because it's like, hey, this paper I can interact with. What does it say? Why would you need a simple little note in a duffel bag? It just doesn't... Again, this is like a personal nitpick, but like, why? Why a duffel bag of all things? I mean, I get it. Duffel bags were probably a thing of the 80s, but nobody... Unless you were a completionist or an accomplishist, you wouldn't really think much of it. You wouldn't. And let's see, what else is there? Oh yeah, there is also Vanny. The game, as described by the video I linked, I know I keep calling it that, I don't know why. I'm just gonna say the Security Breach analysis video. The analysis video... Oh yeah, take it over that way, I believe. The analysis video is basically it basically tells us that the game doesn't know what it really wants to do with Vanny and Vanessa. Because I don't know word for word exactly what it said, but I do know that the general gist was the game tries to paint Vanessa as someone she's not. It tries to paint her as this distasteful, hostile, angry person that doesn't really like us. Oh, that is so 80s and I love it. It tries to paint Vanessa as this terrible, harmful person that she's really not. It just does. And Vanessa is basically under a form of mind control, thanks to Malhare, Burntrap, whatever you want to call them. Malhare is the alternative name given to Glitchtrap from Help Wanted. And Burntrap is the tiring, reincarnated form of William Afton, even though he should have fucking died in fucking FNAF 6. Like everyone else did. And the whole mind control thing, it feels very basic, and it doesn't really go anything beyond Vanessa was mind controlled, brainwashed, manipulated, whatever you want to call it. Basically, she's following under Malhare's cultist intentions and carrying out his murderous intents. What I believe I read was the reason she was able to bring Burntrap back is she lured children into the Pizzaplex, kidnapped them, killed them, and extracted their remnant in order to turn it into a part of a soul to give to William Afton, or Burntrap. Now, somebody pointed out that bringing William back could be done without actually bringing Afton back. And they said this could have been done with maybe instead Vanny was essentially obsessed with William and really admired his work, because there are real people out there who idolize murderers and serial killers. And it's disturbing, and it's real, and it's horrifying. And it would have made a very interesting point for making Vanny a lot more threatening of a villain had she actually gotten more screen time. And I'm honestly on board with that. Imagine if she wasn't trying to bring Afton back, she was murdering children because of how much she idolized him. That would have been a much better take than what we got. And Vanessa, I understand and believe that she is actually very genuine of a person, as you can tell through her lines of dialogue, that she's very frustrated, she's very, honestly very worried. The game wants us to believe that she is, at some points, hostile and angry and unfriendly when she wants to help, or they want us to believe that she's trying to be helpful when she's hostile, angry, and unfriendly. The game doesn't know what it wants. I mean, again, this part of this comes from the video. And admittedly, it just sucks because the most I could get out of Vanny was a mod for the PC version that basically replaced Roxy with Vanny. And even then, I couldn't get much out of it. There was so much that was going to be initially included. I mean, hell, she even had her own different jump scare and everything, but what we got in the final game was kind of in tune with her very playful, very skippy and happy sadistic behavior. even when she does appear, she only has maybe 1 or 2 varying lines. And she only appears 3 times throughout the game. Once during Lost and Found. Another time during the Atrium part where you have to run a Showtime disc. Another time in the sewers. And another time when you go for the Vanny ending. When you have to, either turn the robots she's controlling against Vanny or free her soul. And it sucks. It does. Because a lot of this comes from the game being incomplete. And it saddens me. It does. So much could have been done.
Good job. Now, please come let me out.
I'm kind of starting to run out of things to say about, my thoughts about the game. I feel like I really said a lot of what I wanted to say, but I want to reiterate. I don't hate the game. I do wish it could have done better, but I don't hate it. I mean, Steel Wool very much cares about their game. They do. And I gotta turn my alarms off. They very much care about the game. They did their best to fix it, even if they couldn't add or fix everything. And I can definitely appreciate that. They're not like Glowstick Entertainment where they offer the world something that turns out to be a buggy piece of shit and then they just completely leave it to die. Now, I can't give Steel Wool a full pass because the key elements that Scott Cawthon used to make the original game so intimidating and terrifying felt very pushed, watered down, changed. And change isn't necessarily bad if you know entirely what you're doing. Instead of staying 5 nights, you are essentially staying 6 hours for 1 night. They basically make it like an hourly thing, and every time you complete certain tasks, it basically tells you just how close you are to the next hour. The thing about Five Nights at Freddy's is not knowing exactly how close you are to the next hour. It basically adds a lot of tension, like wondering how close you could be. Hey, can I? Of course I can. Love that. Oh. Hi, Ennard. What was I saying? I was saying something about... Sorry, I get easily distracted. Oh, the time. It basically makes all of this... Hi. It basically makes it so all of this is hourly based. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but always telling us the minutes close to the next hour? Honestly, I feel like it could have been better off without that. And what else is there? There is the tension. The tension in this game is just not there because all the bugginess and the difficulty getting through the game alone, with all the glitchiness, bugginess, all that, it basically made for a very frustrating experience, especially if after hours you died because of a bug or had to restart because of a bug or glitch. and you lost a long, long amount of progress. And not only that, always knowing where the animatronics are, it just doesn't feel scary. I mean, granted, their shadowed forms are incredibly intimidating, but there's a lot to be desired when it comes to the design. And by design, I mean their functionality. I mean, when you take Roxy's eyes, she's no longer able to be affected by the Phaser Blaster or the Phascam. Like, that makes it incredibly terrifying. But she still patrols in certain... She still patrols in certain parts of the Pizzaplex in a certain pattern. And this makes her stupidly easy to avoid. I feel what could have been better was if they weren't restricted to certain paths. Like, it could have been a little bit luck-based, but if it wasn't so predictable, I feel like it could have been so much better. I don't know, like... I'm honestly just hoping that the DLC will be incredible and just very well worth it. Because they're coming out with Five Nights at Freddy's Help 1 and 2 later this year. No idea what that's going to be about. Actually, let me see if we have a detail yet. Yeah, we don't really have a lot of detail on this. But we'll see what happens later on. So, I don't really think I have a lot more I want to say. I pretty much spent nearly an hour 30 minutes talking about this. Which is funny because it's almost nearly as long as the video. But I do want to say that it's not impossible to enjoy this game, but if you're unlucky, you might have a difficult time doing so. But I did want to return to this and just really appreciate the game for what it could do, and, well, discouraging what it... I don't want to say what it couldn't, because it did still try. But in the end, it's ultimately up to the player to decide whether they really like the game or not. I mean, hell, I've said it like a million times now. I did love it. I did enjoy it. It wasn't perfect, but it was still a game with a new, fresh take on things. Let's just hope that the DLC will be worthwhile. So, I don't really have any more things I gotta say, so I hope you all enjoy the videos, and I can't wait to see what the DLC brings.